You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Episode 277 of Meet the Farmers. We're back to a farmer visit this week, and I travelled down the road for this episode to meet Norfolk-based pig and arable farmer Tom Wright. Tom started out on his own in the pig world after buying a couple of acres off his father and building 2 sheds when he was just 23 years old. He's since built a successful contract finishing business and a business erecting sheds for other producers based on his own design. Tom was determined to ensure good ventilation for his sheds, and the benefits of his design, both for the sheds and the pens, were clear when I visited. As a signifier of Tom's success, he was named Young Pig Farmer of the Year in 2014 and was one of the Pig Farmer of the Year finalists at the 2016 Farmers Weekly Awards. Tom's entrepreneurship doesn't stop at pigs though, and he and his partner Joe have also developed a successful camping business with now a few different sites across Norfolk. And they also have grown sunflowers since 2023. To top everything off, Tom has even built his own house. To start us off, let's head to the pig sheds, which Tom showed me round just before Christmas. When you were setting up the shed, what was the thinking then in terms of the best way to set up the stalls, numbers, that kind of thing?
Well, about 45 pigs per pen, and for Freedom Foods and the general workings of the shed, we need 1/3 of the area to be what we call a dung passage, 2/3 laying area. So, yeah, those two factors essentially make the size and shape of the pen. So yeah, we're 45 pigs per pen, and we have a gate in the middle, so the shed is basically symmetrical. If you cut it down the middle, you've got the dung passage on each outer wall, and the laying area in the middle of the building, which is warmer in the winter. In the summer, obviously, things get a bit difficult with pig keeping generally, however you're doing it, but yeah, that is, I suppose it's a take on the more traditional kind of pig shed.
Yeah, and I mean, looking down on them now, they all seem pretty chilled.
They are, yeah, incredibly happy, incredibly clean at the moment, growing well. It's certainly a nice job, pig keeping through the winter, especially around Christmas. You quite like getting out of the house and burning some energy. Other times of the year, when you're trying to get on with harvest or drilling, or it's just generally summertime, there's a lot of sweat involved in pig keeping. But there we go, it's how I've earned my living essentially. If I hadn't have done this, I wouldn't be in a position where I am now with a decent business and so on.
Thanks for having me on the show, Ben. Thank you very much. So here we are at Spring Farm, which is a farm that's built by me back when I was mad in my 20s. So I'm probably still fairly mad now. So yeah, we sit on a 4-acre farm, which is beside my dad's farm. And I've branched off on my own as, I suppose, because of the economics of farming and so on over the last 30 years. Yeah, the viability of a sort of 500-acre farm was realised when I was young that it wasn't going to provide for 2 families, 2 livings. So yeah, I set about in my own way while always helping back on the home farm. But it's enabled me to gain my independence and my own business, and I suppose, yeah, quite topically, an asset base, which is what you need to start in business or get anywhere. To do anything, you need money and to borrow money. And that's what, through a lot of hard work and sweat and tears, it has enabled me to do. Yeah, so here we are today.
Yeah.
Spring Farm itself here is 2,000 pigs, and then we do other diversification at other farms, essentially other sites around. And then the home farm is spring barley, wheat, and oilseed rape, and a bit of fodder beet. Used to be sugar beet, but that stopped in 2020.
I mean, take me back to that point where you took the decision to divide the farm, in essence, go out on your own. Did you think about other options at the time, or was this quite a clear path for what you wanted to do?
I definitely always wanted to be a farmer, and I briefly attended Harper Adams in 2003. I think I lasted till November. And, I remember having to have several meetings with John Donaldson and him saying that I shouldn't leave and there was no future and I'd just become a contractor. Never been academic, and I was struggling with how I thought university would be a bit less hands-on and a bit more free time maybe, but certainly at Harper it was quite full on. I enjoyed the time I was there, especially Freshers Week and so on, innit? The main thing was I knew I wanted to start my own business, and I didn't want a big student debt from a 4-year course, which I knew then would mean I'd have to get a job and not be able to start my own business. So yeah, I left by November, came back home, just started working. Dad had a bit of work, say a couple of months in a year, and then I went to work for other farmers here and there, so freelance, part-time work, and built up about 12 customers, I suppose.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So I was always doing something different here and there, and that got by. That was earning me a living. I was learning a lot, which is important. Then I got into calf rearing through meeting a chap who's about to retire, and again learnt a lot. Didn't earn much money, but it was quite a bind, really. Feeding calves twice a day in my early 20s for several years. That meant I couldn't really go anywhere, but I suppose it meant I saved money, and in the early days of business, it certainly taught me a lot.
Yeah. I think that's a good point actually as well, isn't it? Because almost the lesson there is almost just do something, and as long as you're getting something from it, so as long as you're stepping forward in some way, in this case, it was a learning journey, then that then spurs you onto the next thing. What was it that triggered you to sort of say, okay, I want to move on to something else now?
I suppose only really just earning a basic living back then. I mean, I think I was charging £8 an hour for sort of tractor driving, and calf rearing was earning a few pounds a head, but not. Yeah, it was it was not going to pay a mortgage or get anywhere. So yeah, I was looking out, and then a neighbouring farmer suggested about looking after pigs on contract, or bed and breakfast pigs as they're famously called, and put me in touch with BQP, who at that point, we're talking 2006, they were looking to expand for new people, offering financial incentives to do so. And that was it really.
It's only been pigs. People probably think South Norfolk, Suffolk way is pig territory. Tell us a little bit about this part of Norfolk. Tell us about where we are, sort of landscape, local farming.
Yeah, so we are in the Norfolk Broads here. We are in an area of lowland, not like the Fens. People always think that Norfolk is basically the Fens. They get them confused. But we have what we call gently rolling countryside. Yeah, in some of the fields, we have dizzy heights of 15 metres off sea level, rolling down to. So we have wet meadows on this farm, which in this part of the world they're called doles, DOLE. Which I think is quite specific to Norfolk. Yeah. And they are like the tributaries that feed into the Broads. So we have running water in dikes, again, a word which is quite specific to Norfolk, which means a sort of 3 metre wide canal waterway.
Yeah. We have dikes in Essex as well.
You do, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
It's maybe East Anglia.
Yeah, could be. The word dole, that is a new word on me.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's... People never know what you're talking about when you say doles. So, yeah, on the farm here we have, essentially very wet land, which is grazed by the sheep. We call it bottomless peat because you can cut a stick 20 foot long and just push it into the peat, almost effortlessly. So that's the Broads element of this area in the farm. We're a few miles off a Broad, but you've got the River Yare nearby, and you're always in between two rivers in Norfolk, especially this part.
Yeah, and often when I'm talking about national parks, I tend to be talking with upland farmers, but of course you're within a national park, but you're lowland, and you have, as part of the wider business, it's an arable farm. So what's that like in terms of sitting alongside the Broads Authority?
I mean, the areas are quite specific. So it is where we are here at the house. It's not Broads Authority.
Okay.
But over there, where the water is Broads Authority. Okay. So we're in amongst two different councils, and the Broads National Park is still kind of in its infancy. It's early days, I think, for that. It's quite confusing sometimes.
Now, I'm becoming a bit of a stuck record on the topic, but quite understandably, it is what we're talking about a lot in farming, and I think it's going to dominate discussions for the next year at least, and that is APR, BPR, inheritance tax situation. Before I came out recording, I did my usual thing of just Google the guest and see what comes up first of all, because I think it's really interesting sort of what comes up with farmers in the wider press. And with you was a piece in the Express where you were spoken to about the inheritance tax situation. You yourself went down to London as well. Your start of a 10. Just give us some thoughts on this current situation.
Sadly, as time goes on, I think we're all just realising how bad it is. Yeah, I think it's good that we have public support, and it's certainly highlighted to lots of people who didn't know before the sort of dire economics of farming. Yeah, I've seen people and sort of engaged with people on Twitter say that didn't understand how we wouldn't be able to pay this bill, and then you explain to them about the sort of 0.5% return on capital if you're lucky, and then they eventually actually see the light quite often. So yeah, I suppose the only positive is it's been a bit of a way of engaging with the public not in a way we want to, but and them actually probably finally understanding that it's a very difficult way to make a living. I once met one guy at Eastern College when I did a tractor course when I was 16, and he famously said, "Oh, we're only in it for the money." Oh. I've always wondered where it was like, it was about the year 2000, where he got to in life.
Yeah.
Because bless him.
It's a good point. I mean, how would you be impacted if, it's looking like there are probably going to be many changes made, if at all, certainly not for this Parliament. But if nothing were to change from the current projected legislation, how would it impact your business?
And you just don't know, do you? It's running the gauntlet of the 7 years as and when you do that, and then people rushing to do it now is not easy. For us, it had been conversations that were ongoing already and so on. Dad in his early 60s, and me having, it's 5 of us, I'm the eldest of 5, but it's never easy, is it?
No.
Varying, sort of levels of interest or ability to help. We've all got, essentially, none of us have a living from the home farm, Hall Farm. Dad runs that and so on, and needs to keep running it for him to be, to pay his bills and so on. So the gifting element is very difficult at this point. Very difficult for him to carry on. Or I think that's the main thing. It's very difficult for anyone to do with active parents, and it's only really works for investors where they're sitting in their armchair and decide to give it over, and they've got a contract farmer, and it makes no odds to whether they own it or not. Because it really is a tax that only impacts, specifically small, like the NFU have said, family farm tax. It specifically impacts small farms far more than anything else, really.
And that aside, and it is the topical point I suppose lots of people are talking about, but other challenges, and I suppose putting it on a positive framework, opportunities for your business. What does 2025 look like and beyond? I know there's going to be a lot of farmers keeping fingers crossed for next year.
Yeah, I think I'd like to have more positive to say, but I think the reality of the current climate, high interest rates. We're all, pretty much all farmers have got a bit of borrowing and so on, and diversification. We've always been told to diversify, and we've done a lot here. That's kind of been done, and since COVID has fallen a bit by the wayside, so that's kind of off, and also not wanting to spend money through the implications of needing money to pay a bill or having to pay more inheritance tax seems to be the big thing that everyone's saying at the moment, which is awful really for rural communities and jobs, and the actual rural turnover is not going to be, it'd be nice to have something positive to say for 2025 then, but at this point in time it's really just try and enjoy farming really, and plan ahead, I suppose.
And take us through your diversification journey as well, because like you say, you have diversified in a few different areas.
I suppose I've done it a bit differently, to be fair, from the average farm. There's a few fields away from the farm, which is in some ways made it easier to do projects and in other ways not. So yeah, me and Joe set up Hickling Campsite in 2016, which is 12 miles from where we are here at Spring Farm. Yeah, no, it's gone incredibly well. It's worked well. So that Hickling, most people have heard of because of Hickling Broad, which
of course
is the biggest broad in Norfolk and hence the biggest broad in the world, actually. So it's quite famous. And that, yeah, it went incredibly well. And then COVID, it was just absolutely insane. We had to turn the phones off, basically. And then you had some good years through COVID, and then it just fell off a cliff because everyone went abroad. And then this year, picking up a bit, but then we had the worst summer ever. And it was, hard work. But yeah, no, we're definitely glad to have done it and so on. But I think, through COVID, making staycations the only option, and then COVID disappearing and everyone going abroad, we were in a bit of a scenario that I suppose with the cost of living as well, people don't necessarily want to spend £100 on a shepherd's hut anymore like they did. Lots of people's mindsets are changing currently, the way of thinking, and since the pandemic and so on, people are spending differently and they're thinking differently, and then I suppose there'll be something open up again. Yeah,
I always think it's again, there's that message, isn't there, that farmers need to diversify. You need to diversify to actually spread your risk, but at the same time, as more and more people do more as well, does it get more difficult in terms of, not necessarily in terms of competition, because again, different people are going to be diversifying in different areas, and often it's going to be very locally specific. But if you just had your farming business today, would you diversify in the same way? Again, difficult question to sort of reflect on, really. But do you think that tourism is still a good route?
I think it is. Yeah, I suppose the main barrier currently would be interest rates and so on. And lucky to have sort of 2010 to 2020 of, very good times to borrow money and do stuff, cheapish materials, because we built the shepherd's huts ourselves and did everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. I needed the planning application for the campsite myself. So, and Joe did the website. So literally no profession, no one else involved. And that's right. How we, that's the way we afforded to do it, and so on. I don't know. I think this is, possibly been over-egged a bit with the whole glamping. Yeah, I think there's enough about now. It's all these things kind of move in fits and spurts, don't they?
So looking ahead a bit, let's look at that. It's difficult it's really difficult, isn't it, to have any sort of, we talk about visions quite a bit and sort of think about where you want to go. And of course, farming is a long-term game. But even with that in mind, I really think it's been talking with a lot of people. It's difficult to not have, you have to have a degree of flexibility at the moment, don't you, in terms of your head of what you want to do, but you also still, because it's what farmers do, you still have to invest for the long term, and you have to really believe in that in the long term things will be good. So if you were to, I'm going to put you on the spot a bit, but if you were to have that sort of 5 to 10 year plan, where do you see the business in that time?
Good question. Really just, I've spent my life working to enable me to just stay in farming, really. So the diversification we've done and so on, and other properties we've bought, are just to really be able to remain in some form farming as a family. Yeah, whether I have to pay a big bill for this and that to buy a sibling out or so on, I don't know. But I suppose, 5 or 10 years time, just to be doing more farming than diversification is sort of, that was a route to earn more money, but it takes you away from doing the actual job, which is the entire problem with doing it, and being told to do it, saying what you do doesn't stack up, do something else to make it stack up, which is the most, I think Tony Blair was the first to say it, wasn't he? Diversify, which is means to an end, I suppose. If it's, I'm now 40 and have spent a lot of my life doing other things to just,
It's a bit still in pigs as well. I suppose, again, when we talked about borrowing money, at least you've got the concrete down now. So, but in terms of, you still see sort of a future in pigs at least?
Definitely, yeah. And I think that's the way everyone's looking now to actually earn some money, talk about saving up to pay a bill and not spending so much, and sort of more talk towards the intensification of farming to make the farm yield more. Possibly looks like a lot of the environmental goals and payments and so on have possibly gone out the window from what we're seeing or what is going to be announced. Yeah, strange times where everything that was promised pre-election by government has really gone out the window.
Yeah, I mean, either you or your dad signed up to any sort of scheme at all, whether that's SFI or whether that's countryside stewardship or anything before?
No, not at all. Dad's fairly old school, and we try and keep paperwork to the minimum, basically. It was getting to that point where we were, looking more into it. But then I suppose that's now gone out the window. But I suppose being a mixed farm with, as you can see, we are never far off a sort of woodland or hedgerow. We're relatively small, say small fields. I suppose we average about 20 acres. Small for probably the national average. So yeah, we have a good diverse farm with wildlife and woodland, wetland and ponds and naturally. So we feel like we've already got quite a good spread. Just dealing with this paperwork, we don't have any mental headspace left to read these forms and guidance books, I think.
I think it's a really good point as well, because it is. I mean, people sort of often say, it's money for nothing. It's definitely not, because actually, there is a lot of extra work. And like you say, a lot of extra headspace involved in all these extra bits and pieces.
I definitely think you're right. Especially as livestock farmers, every morning, I muck out 2,000 pigs and so on. By the time you've done that, you're not really in the mood for looking for a guidance book or anything. And Dad's the same. He's got nearly a couple hundred head of cattle to feed every morning and so on. And as a mixed farm, you just have enough permanently. Every day there's something to do, something crops up and so on. And I suppose you could say you could pay a professional to do all the applications and everything. And it might yield a bit on on a smaller farm. It doesn't particularly bring in masses.
Yeah. So, I mean, and just, sorry, I'm going to sort of like reflect on this, because actually it's quite an interesting point, actually, because I think your case is probably quite typical in some ways in terms of, I suppose, the question that would be, what would encourage you, or because the uptake, for example, of SFI has been much, much lower than DEFRA have thought that it would be generally, and there are these various stumbling blocks. So what would encourage you, if anything, to take part in some sort of one of those schemes, or would it be just a complete, no, not interested?
I suppose simplification of it. I suppose in a perfect world, if an advisor or so could just pop out to your farm for an afternoon and look out, look around and say, this qualifies, you haven't used a pesticide on here, and showing the record, and a more practical approach, and then just show them what you're actually doing rather than trying to wade through a guidebook and then fill it in. I mean, back from single farm payment and all the dramas of trying to do that, and nearly always there was a mistake that was not necessarily your fault or very difficult to spot, or and then you just almost feel like a criminal sometimes when you made it. It's just that element of fear, I suppose, with some of these things and checkups where, I've had some checkups where the people, the inspector's absolutely fine, and other times where they're just being very demanding, and you just sort of always have nightmares about it. Yeah. Sorry, back to your point. I mean, to encourage things, it'd be nice. I mean, Dad doesn't really want to, but I'd like to plant a few more hedges and do a bit more sort of generational thing, which is probably quite common. But just to have a plan of, like we see now, we've got a new government for 4.5 years, and they've just possibly thrown everything out the window. We don't even know. We don't even have a clear anything from them at the moment. And in 4.5 years, maybe someone else. So we just need like a 50-year plan or something. It's very important now that the food and nature and everything needs a plan. And
with that, dare I say it, which is again conversation I have with a lot of people a lot of the time, is those two words. It's vision and it's leadership as well, which, I mean, if you look at, certainly if we're looking at the politics of it and you go back, we've had, again, it's said often, but we've had so many DEFRA secretaries over, across governments over the last 10 years. It's impossible to actually have any sort of leadership or vision because you keep on changing the goalposts.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's very common in government now that people appear from another role, to move to DEFRA secretary, and they've had no background, no experience in farming or the countryside. I suppose that's nearly always how it works, but at least if they stay in the job for longer, they get more of an idea as it goes on. What can you do at the moment? There's no clear message. Maybe there will be in the new year.
So, Tom, I've always finished the show with two questions. The first is a message for the public, and the second is a message for farmers. What would your message for the public be at the moment?
Definitely along the lines of, look out for local food, try and support a mechanism away from supermarkets where you can. I know it's not practical for everybody, but at least understand what's going on around you and so on, and how food is produced on your doorstep that you don't really necessarily know about. Whenever friends and from a non-farming background or so come to the farm, they're just absolutely fascinated with things. I've never had anyone come here and not just be asking questions and just absolutely amazed by everything. So everyone naturally has a instinct to find out a bit more. And we're not going away. We're here. Sort of, we need to get back that relationship between city folk and country folk.
And your message for your fellow farmers?
Yeah, I suppose at the moment I'd say just be strong and hang in there. We'd got to the point where we know we're not going to have any government support. We haven't really had any for I wouldn't say we've had any in my lifetime, to be fair. I think back when Tony Blair said diversify and so on in the late 90s, I think that was signalling end of support for the countryside and so on. We haven't really had a lot since, any policy or so on. So I think we've just got to be more independent, and we've always got our heads screwed on, but we've got to look out for each other more, and we'll get through it.
Tom Wright. That's it for today. Join me next time when I'll be joined by Kyle Richardville, who is a soil health consultant with Understanding Ag, and farmer Stuart Johnson, who was the 2023 Soil Farmer of the Year and farms near Hexham. Until then, have a great week. Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast, you're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk.